almost anything else, whether it's a piece of electronics or it's a piece of software. There are ways you can go ahead and look at things, look at the behavior of things, and figure out what works, what doesn't work, what seems to affect things, what seems not to affect things. Sometimes you come up with some interesting side effects that you didn't expect, and we'll actually talk about some of those. You know, everyone's experience may not also be the same. So I'm going to caveat all the information I'm sharing as not necessarily a recipe, because the point of this session is really to try to get you people to be able to go ahead and look at your data, because everybody, we're all writing different books, different genres, maybe different stores. Your focus is in French or whatever. Each of these stores, each of these genres, everybody's experience is going to be a little different. But I've talked with a lot of people, I've pulled a lot of data, and I've got a lot of my own personal data as well. So, so I think from a statistical point of view, I do have some information that I think is relatively true. Now, for those of you who may have seen my session last year, some things have changed. And that's kind of the point. These things aren't static. It's the engineers at Amazon in this case that, occasionally how they tweak things evolves. So how do you deal with, you've got a recipe and you go, my recipe isn't working. Well, the answer is you need to understand how do you develop a recipe for you. So that's really what this session is really going to be all about. So again, caveat emptor. Don't blame me if it doesn't work for you. I'm trying to give you the tools to figure out how it will work for you. My thing may not work for you, but I think it'll get you very close to something maybe better than what you have, maybe not. We'll see. Okay. And it's strange for a physics guy here or data analyst guy to be talking about marketing funnels, but here we are. One of the takeaways, what is a campaign all about? What are you even trying to advertise to? You're trying to, people who are established. Like for instance, let's say Stephen King. Stephen King has an audience. Ideally, marketing spend for Stephen King is going to be to people who maybe aren't reading him. His readers, his big fans, they're waiting for his second book already, or his next book already. So you don't have to market to those people. They're sold. They're sold before the book was even written. So you're really marketing to people who don't know you, ultimately. But you want to evolve those people into those fans that you don't even have to market on, to. So, the concept of cold, warm, and hot really does apply. And I kind of enumerate. My goal on these slides, as much as possible, I've uploaded them to the Schedule app, so anyone should be able to download them, is they should be standalone, though I'm not going to read the slides to you, I'm talking to them, so what I say may augment the slides, but they should be good enough standalone. So I'll refer to some of the things specifically, though. Cold, is a familiar concept in marketing where it's like a cold call. You've never talked to this person, they don't know who you are, but you're trying to offer them something to buy. That's really what campaigns are about. And then once you have a little bit of information, maybe they've bought a previous book, and they're not necessarily fans yet, then we got the concept of warm. They might be aware of you, but it's like your book was okay, but they might be willing to give you another try, and that marketing campaign suddenly pops up and they say, oh yeah, I read one of his books, it was okay. Oh, a new one, let me look at it. Oh, that looks interesting, I'll go buy it. And then, then hot fans are the ones you don't have to spend any money on. They're already, they're signed up, they're on board. So, I mean, we're going to talk about this marketing funnel more later, but before we go really very far, let's start talking about the nuts and bolts. I like cartoons. So we need to think about Amazon from the point of view of Amazon. What are they trying to do? They really, sure they make money on us buying advertisement, but ultimately they make money if they sell product on their store. And if they don't sell product in their store, they don't have a business model. So they're trying to find, if you're advertising a techno thriller, you're advertising a fantasy, whatever. They're trying to find the right person to buy it. So they only want to present ads to the people who are likely to be interested. I'll give an anecdote. Like, one of the worst things people can do, and it's a very common problem, and it's not intuitive what you would think would be an issue. So imagine you're just starting off, and you're creating a campaign, and you realize, oh, okay, well, I don't have any fans yet. This is my first book. Hey, mom, dad, uncle, aunt, you reach out to all your friends and neighbors and whatever to buy your book. I mean, it's a natural instinct, but I'd say it's one of the worst things you can actually do. Why? Because think of what Amazon does. The back-end processing of Amazon is an algorithm. It's a program. So it's learning from what you do or what happens with the thing you're offering. So imagine you're offering some hack-and-slash horror novel, and your grandma buys it because, it's like, she's not going to read it. She's doing it because of you. But what does the algorithm learn from that? The algorithm learns that, okay, grandma, what does she normally buy? Oh, she's into knitting, and she buys yarn and crochet needles and other things like that. And you're like, oh, well, she bought this book. Well, maybe this book is interesting to the yarn community. Obviously, then that's going to be a major failure ultimately, because you have friends and family that may not normally be a reader of your book. And you don't want them buying, you don't want people who wouldn't normally be a reader of your type of book to be buying it, because it's teaching the algorithm something that's wrong. It's misleading it. And ultimately, that's when the algorithm, a lot of people experience, and I'll actually talk about this, I can't get Amazon to spend any money. It's a common problem. A lot of people have it. And it usually has something to do with that, where the algorithm is just so confused by what it's been told about this book, it just doesn't know what to do. And it starts off on a bad foot with regards to, who are your initial purchasers. And it's like trying to, steer a boat. You can course correct, but it takes a while. So let's start talking about that. I talked about this a bit. So, I'm going to give you an idea. And the specifics of what I'm talking about with regards to the algorithm, and I'm even going to give a formula, and those who were here last year will be familiar with it. The details of the formula aren't important. But the key elements of what we're talking about here are. And I boil it down at the bottom. So, the things that Amazon tends to look at, or the algorithm tends to look at, is, what's the sales history? So did grandma buy it? Okay, and what did she buy? So it starts to create this web of information, trying to correlate who might be interesting buyers for this thing that they have to sell. Keywords, there's various types of campaigns. So, are there keywords that are, when you put a book up for sale, it'll ask you for some keywords that you think are relevant. You personally, the author, thinks are relevant. And then it's gonna, sales history includes a sales count. Like, sales history is interesting, but it gets more and more interesting the more sales you have. It gets more and more data. And then obviously a bid, how much are you willing to pay for a click is relevant. So all of these things, come into play. And so I put this together to give an example of what I'm talking about. A lot of the details, a lot of you aren't math people, so we won't nerd out over the specifics of the numbers. This is just to give you an idea. I'm trying to storyboard what we're talking about. So and so let's walk through this. So imagine someone's searching for a thriller. Thriller book sold to someone who buys chocolate, diet food, and protein powder. Book 2 sold to someone, thrillers, video games, gardening supplies. Then science fiction and batteries, you can read the rest. So, I'm going to say like book 1, so let's see, how many of them ticked off on the thriller topic? All right, so book sale 1, let's say your first sale had nothing to do with thriller. So you're like, all right, the relevance score there is a 0. I'm like, so you're teaching the algorithm something and going, is this book associated with thrillers? Even if you say it is, it's trying to get a positive affirmation from the sales history. So you give it hints up front when you check in the book what you think it is. And then the algorithm is going to go ahead and say, all right, that's interesting data. I'll take that as under consultation, and then I'll look at what I see. And it's going to start learning, okay, well, the book, the person who bought, the second book, that was a thriller, so let's give it a 0.5. And no for thriller on the third sale. Fourth sale wasn't having anything to do with thriller background. Book 5 sale was. So you start seeing a number, if you're thinking about a program as some mathematical thing, it starts to calculate a number. So the number itself is not the point, but it is using the information and doing something with it. It's creating, it's got a formula that it's plugging it into. Does the book have a direct hit? So it's not important for this discussion, but for those who are going to read through the entire thing, I'm talking about how would a formula actually work when using this information. Now, imagine, when a reader is searching for a book, it's looking through an entire database. Now, imagine yourself as the reader. I'm looking for a book. And each book it finds, it checks the book sales history, calculates relevance score, calculates the keyword relevance, and that creates ultimately a match score. So what you're seeing is a situation where, when you check in a book, you tell it a lot of things. You tell it what keywords. You tell it, because there's a specific section actually, like 7 keywords or whatever. You tell it what categories. So like the genres that you think it's associated with. And, and then it starts to use, live data from what it generates, the sales that occur. And it starts to build a score, And if you just imagine, it doesn't matter the details really about the relevancy score, but it creates a score. It's kind of like, I've never done any of these dating apps, but I'm assuming that in a dating app, you'd have a match score. It's like, oh, you're like 70% compatible with somebody. That's really what you're doing between the Amazon algorithm. The reader is trying to make a love connection between the reader and the person who's trying to sell a book. So what's your love, your match score there? And so we'll take a couple of case examples. And it's, at least in my angle, it's hard to read that. So, case 1, 2, 3, 4. And I used a couple of examples that I think are indicative of what I'm talking about. So a book with a solid history has sales. Bids 40 cents. So the person who wrote the marketing campaign bid 40 cents to match up. He's bidding on thrillers, let's say. Ultimately there's a direct hit on a keyword in the book description. You've described yourself as a thriller. And so you come up with some magic match score, 0.7. Okay, so and that cost you a 40-cent click. Now these match scores don't necessarily mean so if you got a click, obviously that doesn't mean you got a sale. You got someone's interest. The other one maybe has the same thing, but the match score for case one was a 0.7, for example, bidding 40 cents. So you paid 40 cents, or you would pay 40 cents. And the other one is they're a lower bid, but has more relevant data, and match score is higher. And then you got a case of a new book with no history. You're bidding 50 cents. You're like bidding a lot, and you end up having a 0.25 match score. So what I'm indicating here is, go to the right, I guess. When the reader searches and the algorithm finds 4 books, they're going to be presented to the reader in this kind of order. So, and think about it. If you look at this example, the person who was bidding, was willing to pay the most for clicks, didn't actually win the bid. And let me tell you how I got to this scenario. Because I learned something very quickly when I started trying to do marketing as a data analyst. When I was trying to work on my marketing campaign on Amazon, it was okay. And I hired a professional marketing person, and they didn't do any better. So I'm like, is this the best that can happen? So I went ahead and talked to one of my friends who's a 7-figure author, and and has been for a long time, which is a key point of this anecdote. So since like 2000, he was in the beginning of the Kindle rush, etc. And I sat side by side with him and compared, because we literally, I created a campaign, he created a campaign. We both write largely the same kind of stuff. And, almost, his top, I match his readers and he matches mine. And so I put I don't remember the exact bid, but I put a 30-cent bid in for, I'm willing to pay 30 cents for clicks. He did the same thing, and when those campaigns activated, we looked to see where do we land on like the carousel. Most of you are probably familiar with. I'll show examples, but of the carousel where you're seeing the sponsored ads. He ended up on like page 1 or 2. I was on page like 17. Same bid. So this is kind of just showing you, the element. It's not just the bid. There's history. So you'll find that over time, the more sales you get, the more data, the more track record you have, the better campaigns tend to do. And it isn't just associated directly with the campaign. It has also to do with the author account, the publishing account. So, in this example, the person who got, who would be top of the food chain presented to a reader would be the guy who bid the least, because he had a solid history and lots of sales. Whereas someone who literally had no history and no sales, just starting off and was bidding higher, didn't get in. Wasn't getting an impression, so to speak. And then obviously people with messy history and some sales are going to have problems as well, even if they're bidding high. So these are all things that drive the behavior of what we all see. Obviously, I talked a little ahead about this. Where do we see these ads? Anywhere you're seeing the sponsored tag, you're seeing ads. And in this case, when I was searching for, one of my titles, I showed up twice. My sponsored ad kicked in because it was like, oh, you're looking for something factor, and lo and behold, there it is. My sponsored ad popped up right at the top, and then and then it actually found one of mine. And then some other, whatever. And this is also, a demonstration of the carousel is, and I will actually emphasize something I didn't emphasize at all last year is I'm a big fan of advertising paperbacks, and I'm gonna go into why. I forget whether I have that in session 1 or session 2, so stay tuned. But briefly speaking, paperback. Most of you probably don't advertise paperbacks because you're like, I don't sell any paperbacks, so why bother? There's a whole lot of reasons that you want to, and in some cases, because some of the categories that exist only exist for paperback. They don't exist for Kindle. So, there are things that show up that are, we got huge competition. Well, there's a lot of books out there in paperback. And if you think about it, what is a campaign? A campaign, you're trying to associate what you're advertising to a target audience. That target audience is other books, other people's books. Because that's what Amazon really is. It's selling stuff. So if there's only 12 of your genre, you're only going to show up on 12 books. It's usually not a good idea. There are a lot of paperbacks out there. We're blinded to that because we have a bias. We all collectively do. There's a lot of paperbacks. I'll show that data later. Obviously there's brand advertising. I won't really touch on to that at all today. And then this is coming back. It went away for a while, and it's coming back. I'm seeing it more in various stores. The more you sell, most people's experience is the more you sell, the quicker the ramp is. And why is that? Well, you're getting more history on your campaigns. And then there's also features like this where, again, Amazon's the fiddler on the roof Yenta. It's a matchmaker. It's trying to match the reader to the book. And, like, hey, customers who viewed whatever item you're looking at also like this. And, like one of my books showed up and Mark Dawson, et cetera. And that's free. I didn't pay for that. That's Amazon going ahead and saying, with the algorithm and going, you know what, you're looking at a particular book. Well, if this doesn't catch your fancy, maybe some of these are. None of us pay for that. That's gold. And helps expand word of mouth. Where some of the sales come from, this is one of my key points at the very end of the second session, is ultimately what we market is a small percentage of our overall sales, or at least it should be. Because ultimately, we're trying to bring people into this funnel, and sales occur there, but we're over time growing a larger and larger set of fans, larger set of readers. And then as we put stuff out, those people, they're not up here anymore. We're not marketing to them. They're buying our books. So in reflection, when we look at our earnings versus what we're spending or the sales associated with a campaign, our earnings are much higher than the sales from the ads. For me, it's a very small percentage. But it's just feeding the trough. It's just building the bunker, so to speak, of all readers. Okay, we've got an algorithm. We kind of have an idea of what it's doing. So what do we do with it? So this is where I'm going to get into the, I don't know where I'm transitioning into session 2, so bear with me here. But I did introduce the marketing funnel thing. Again, cold, warm, hot. The analog to the cold, warm, hot thing is, and this is certainly new for this session, is category, automatic, and ASIN and keywords. And these are type of marketing campaigns in Amazon. Yeah, and I explain it here. So, essentially, category is the easiest way for you without being like, a lot of people fret when they're creating campaigns. Oh, which author do I have to target? What is the right keyword that I need to use? And my argument is, you're putting the cart before the horse. You don't. I mean, yes, you might have an idea of what keywords and what authors or whatever, or what books to target. That's fine, and a lot of people do that, and they're successful, and God bless them. But my point here is that you may be wrong, you might be right. Category perspective is a lot easier to be right about, because it controls a bunch of things. Like, it's easier to say, am I confident that my book is in this particular genre? Probably. Versus, is it associated with this keyword? Is this the best keyword to use? I don't know. Or is this the best author to, you can probably be more confident with the category. And oh, by the way, remember, when we were talking about, we want our ads to show up as many places as possible. When you're targeting a keyword, it's the specific books that seem to be associated with a keyword. That's the only places it'll show up. Or if you're targeting a particular book, it's only going to show up for that book. So anyone who looks at that book, great. But when you're like targeting thrillers or whatever the giant category is, you might have like 40,000 targets that it's suddenly targeting. And you'd be surprised. The cost per clicks on those, we'll talk about the specifics of that certainly in session 2. But this is what I use to get my new people in, because it's easy. And it's cost effective, in my opinion, for me. Again, these are all things that you have to experiment with. I'm just kind of giving you a point that I've had success with. And then the thing that most people don't realize is the automatic campaigns often don't work very well. Like, for instance, that seven-figure guy that I had compared notes with, I was in shock that how well his automatic campaigns worked. And, and it just blew my mind. And now I completely understand, because it's all about that track record. Automatic campaigns are really about, what does the algorithm think is the best choice? Where should I advertise this to? So, like I say here, it's the corollary to warm. Amazon has a clue what to do with your book, so let it try. That's obviously a secondary category, but it only gets a clue once you've had sales. So, when you're starting off, you're like, bring in, again, it's not the mom and family and friends thing. It's the people you don't know. It's the wide swath. And once you have those and you have some proof of interest and there's some trend lines, then we've got the algorithm getting warmed up and going, okay, I think I know what to do with this. So I've got automatic categories as well. And then hot, the corollary there is ACoS and keyword targeting. And note, a lot of people start off with that. I don't. I actually do not do ACoS or keyword targeting until I've gathered data from my sales in the top 2 tiers. Because I get affirmation about these, like I actually have a formula for myself that says, okay, if I'm getting lots of clicks but no sales, these are things that I'm going to say, don't advertise to this stuff anymore, because I'm losing money. It's a bleeder. But if I'm getting a lot of sales associated with a particular, keyword, sure, why not? I'll start a keyword campaign based on that. Same thing for ACoS. Sometimes some books really correlate well to one of my books. I'm like, oh, why not? Okay, I'll target that book. And those usually have a higher conversion rate. As you're going down that funnel, it's a higher and higher conversion rate. Key learnings. Let's see if I've gone over this. Allow you to cast a wide net category. Yeah, the red doesn't, at least from my angle, doesn't come through well. I also do one book per campaign, and I'll actually talk about that in session 2 as to why. Largely because when you run the reports, it allows you to gather data very cleanly. So like for instance, if I have a particular book that I'm running a campaign on, and and I've got sales data, and I have keyword, this keyword seems to be very popular. I've gotten lots of sales associated with this keyword, and one of the reports will tell you what search term brought that reader to your book. You go, okay, that's relevant, and I understand. But if you create a campaign with many books, the problem is you still have the same data. So you're like, oh, I got a lot of sales on that keyword, but you don't know which book it was associated with. So to me, that's really important, because now you're stuck with, was that keyword associated with, my thriller, my fantasy, my this, my that? It's hard to tell sometimes. So I like to be able to measure things and then do something with it. I'm actually getting close to this. This I recall is, I think, one of my last ones, and we'll go for questions. So also, when you're advertising, what kind of customers do you want? I mean, BookBub is actually very popular, and I highly recommend it. Not the ads, but the featured deal, if you can get one. And I make that a very strong distinction. BookBub ads, I'm not so much of a fan of. BookBub featured deals are, and basically it's the largest mailing list in the world, for the most part, for the English language. And if you can get that, that's great. Now, those readers tend to be KU oriented, just as data. And if I ever do a BookBub ad, I don't personally, but some people have a lot of success with it. I choose to do it in this way, or even if I'm doing a Facebook ad. I know I'm going on a tangent, but even if I do a Facebook ad where you get an opportunity to put up a graphic, and I have something on Kindle Unlimited, I advertise that. Read for free on Kindle Unlimited, even though my book might be $6.99. Because if you're a Kindle Unlimited subscriber, that'll be interesting. So there's little things I personally do that are useful, or I've found to be useful. Facebook ads are great because they can target a very wide audience, and it's not stuck to one store. But you're going to run into problems with, they're very willing to spend $1 million a day if you let them. And it's the opposite problem of Amazon. Amazon, I hear a lot of people say, Amazon won't spend my money, for a lot of the reasons I talked about. Facebook has no problem spending your money. They'll spend your money. And it may not be doing you hill of beans good. And in session 2, I definitely talk about, I'm not a fan of Facebook absent the attribution feature of Amazon. If you can't measure it, you don't really know how good it's doing, is my strong assertion. So I do talk about that in session 2. And last but not least, and I'll open for questions, is you really want to keep in mind efficiency. You're in a situation where you need to understand your cost basis for any book. Obviously for ebooks, it's usually pretty simple. If you're at a normal price, it's 70%. Paperback, I broke down one of my books, is like, I might be offering it for 17.99 euros. My print cost is 60%. My royalty is $4.75. So my break-even point is at 26% ACoS on that book, on a paperback. So, these are things that you just have to keep in mind. Now, obviously, I'm also a big fan of telling people, some people are not ready for marketing spend. If you have one book, it's really hard to make profit. It's very unusual. And this is where read-through really does come into play. The ability to actually earn, significant, because you might spend more to get the initial reader, but if you've got like an 8-book series or whatever, like I think I give an example here, 5-book series, you can calculate as an example, a 5-book series, getting a sale is worth $15 for a $7 book. that's, you know, based on data, you can figure that out. So now you have an understanding of your cost basis difference. And that is, I'm going to put this in session 2. So any questions? Yes?
As an author that spans different genres, do you find that the auto in Amazon adverts sometimes picks background information from the wrong genre for the particular book you're trying to advertise?
So you're talking about multi-genre book?
No, I'm talking about an author who has several genres, puts up a book in science fiction, and finds he's getting clicks from urban fantasy.
So I'm in that situation where I primarily put out thrillers, but I've got some science fiction and I've even got some fantasy. And I don't tend to see crossover, but you just have to be very conscious of. Now, I have a lot of crossover readers, so that's where you may see some, the algorithm's learning what it's learning, so it's seeing data from your fans. So if you've got a reader who is very willing to read science fiction and fantasy, so you may see some crossover. But the best you can do is actually target your genres correctly on each book individually. And then if you have readers who will read anything you put out, yeah, that's great. So, things tend to get more efficient over time. Let's go to this side.
So an online person asked, when you were talking about an Amazon budget that wouldn't spend, what is budget slamming?
Budget slamming. I'm not familiar with that term. Does anybody know?
So someone answered online, maybe that would be helpful. Lower the budget to a couple dollars and then slowly raise it. We were talking about how can you get Amazon to spend?
So the budget overall. Okay, so I do go into how to get Amazon to spend, and it really has a lot to do with using the category field. And I have an example where I actually did this, where I tested it literally a couple days ago. And I was like, all right, let me take one of my existing campaigns, category ones, and I was like, all right, let me just double the bid, just to see, and I increased the budget to like $500 a day. And I was like, and I'm like, and it didn't spend the $500, but it suddenly went to like, imagine a single book in a single day had 500,000 impressions. So, it's stupid amount of impressions. So, I wouldn't, and in session 2 I say, I wouldn't recommend that process, but it requires analysis to figure out, it didn't look efficient, but I'd have to figure out why, and and it's using all the same tools that I'd use for any of the other analysis. We're gonna go ping pong.
Thank you.
Yes.
Is there any way to negate the families that buy your book, with the knitting needles and stuff?
Don't tell them about it. I mean, in all seriousness, that's usually the best way. And some people have friends and family, and you tell them, oh, it'll be coming out, some other time. Give it a couple weeks after it's really coming out.
Gotcha.
And just don't tell them, because they want to help you, but yes.
I was just curious, so when we're creating our separate keyword campaigns, let's say a phrase match versus a broad match, and the same keyword is appearing in those separate campaigns for your same book, how does that bidding process work? Like, are you bidding against yourself for the keyword?
So I actually talk about that very specifically in session 2.
Perfect.
Yeah, you can bid against yourself, and I talk about it at length.
Perfect. Thank you.
That's slightly related, sorry, to what I was going to ask. So what happens, or what do you do if your pen name keeps coming up on your cold campaigns?
Your pen name comes up on the what?
On your cold campaigns or your warm, would you negatively target them if you're getting lots of clicks against them?
If you find those are not converting to sales, yes. If they're converting to sales, then okay.
Because you're spending obviously the money on your own name, so.
Say it again?
Because you're spending the money, in your own name. So like the cold, Amazon is sending the, using the cold campaigns for hot people, if you know what I mean.
Sure. I mean, the gotcha is if you're, I mean, some people do advocate for, like doing a negative on your own name.
Yeah.
And which is basically excluding, certain phrases, keywords, or otherwise from being targeted. I tend to not have any rule with that. I look literally at my sales data and go,
Just
what's
test it.
performing?
Yeah,
You know,
okay.
and just go by that, because I may have an opinion that's wrong. You know, so I try to go by data. Yes.
So you use the term solid sales history, and I'm one of the people that has old series that have been kind of derelict. I'd like to freshen those up. What does the algorithm do for something that's had really great, really good sales history, but it's been some time in the past? What sort of degradation do you see in the numbers on that? How do I goose it?
So I would say that, you know, this is like steering a boat. Anything, you know, anything that occurs, it's kind of like you know, it takes a while to convert something, you know, from moving one direction to another. And also, if you get no sales data for a long period of time, you know, that data may go stale. I don't know about, you know, I'll freely admit, I don't know what it does about, you know, aging out old data. So that would be something you'd have to find out, because yes. So we're at the end of the session. We have a 15-minute break, and we'll be going, you know, right at the hour, I guess, or 10. Oh, sorry, 10:30. So thank you, everybody.